Welcome to the Grow Your Practice podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Chad Madden, owner of Madden Physical Therapy and Breakthrough. Join me each week as we dive into the best practices, systems, principles, tips, and tricks to help you grow your private practice. Hey everybody, Chad Madden here with the Grow Your Practice podcast. And in this episode, we are going to review a webinar that we did here with Wendy Beaudet of InSearch Medical. And specifically what we talked about was hiring. And we covered things like, right now I have space. This is a common problem that all practice owners are facing in the market, but the hiring market has dramatically changed, right? It's something that has really evolved over the last 2 years, and it's increasingly difficult to hire clinicians and even support staff. Especially when I think it came up on this podcast that, there are fast food restaurants that are paying more than $20 an hour. So how can we possibly compete in today's market as an independent private practice? So the biggest problem that a lot of us face is underutilization of space and personnel. Today, because it is difficult, it is different, a new challenge in terms of hiring. Many of us have underutilized space, which is a problem. So a little bit of what we cover in this special episode is, do we need to pay more for clinicians as we're hiring them, or front desk or receptionist, marketing, billing, et cetera? Do we need to be more competitive? And Wendy and I both share viewpoints on that. We also cover, my normal hiring methods are not working. And 2 years ago, we used to post on Indeed, and we would have 100 applicants. Now we post on Indeed and we get nothing. What can I do? So Wendy and I both share our thoughts on that. And right now, one of the common viewpoints is it even possible to hire in today's market? We share our thoughts on that. And the other one that I want you to be paying attention to here is this agreement that Wendy and I have that you should always be hiring as a private practice owner, especially if you're looking to increase the impact in your area through the healthcare services that you're providing. So finally, there's also helpful tools and resources for you that we put over at getbreakthrough.com. The specific URL, if you're looking for additional resources on hiring, additional tools on hiring, is getbreakthrough.com/resources. Again, that's getbreakthrough.com/resources. And with that, please enjoy this special edition with Wendy Beaudet of InSearch Medical. There we go. What's your biggest personnel challenge right now? Are you having trouble finding candidates? Are you having trouble that you can find candidates, onboarding them? You're worried about, keeping them busy, et cetera. What are some of the biggest challenges that you hear from practice owners right now, Wendy?
Most of what I'm hearing right now is just that most of our candidates are getting multiple offers, and they're having problems just finding people, period. There's just a shortage of staff. A lot of people have walked away from healthcare for various reasons. So that seems to be the biggest issue, is where are all the PTs?
Great. And early results of the poll are in already. Do you plan on hiring a clinician this year? 19 people said yes. So that was 95%. And one person said not sure. Do you plan on hiring any support personnel? So that would be like front desk receptionist, marketing, billing, perhaps PTA or CODA, something along those lines. That was 65% yes, 15% no, 20% unsure. So state of hiring in 2022, and these are just headlines that our team pulled from Forbes and the New York Times and Healthcare and Finance. It is a very real problem right now. There is a shortage of workers. There is tremendous demand, and the supply is not there. We've seen changes in supply and demand in the workforce. It's highly competitive. We're going to ask Wendy about details about that in a second here. The fair market value of hiring a clinician, it's increasing, and I would venture to say it's dramatically increasing. There's competition that we've seen never before, where as a private practice owner, we have aggressive competition from our local healthcare and hospital systems. And the other thing is employees requesting higher salaries and or other benefits. I know, Wendy, when you and I talked before, you mentioned the work-life balance. So I would love to hear your thoughts and your inputs, your viewpoint on what you're seeing in the marketplace right now, Wendy.
Okay, so what I am seeing is a variety of things, and the work-life balance seems to come up the most. The second thing that is coming up is in regards to that work-life balance, people don't want to work 50, 60 hours a week. They don't want to work every night. They don't want to work every weekend. And they're looking for high pay to cover some of the costs of inflation, the fact that their kids are not being able to go to school, and various other reasons. And I think that people are burned out for the most part. And there was a shortage even 2 years ago, and that shortage just seems to have increased. And our recruiting costs and things have gone up just because those people are harder to find. They're out there, but we have to really kind of dig for them at this point.
I'm wondering if you can define a little bit better, or at least give some detail around that work-life balance. I have heard components of that. It's a common theme now on many business-related podcasts, especially those that are targeted towards business owners or employers. And I'm just wondering, like, from specific examples, what exactly does that mean? I know you mentioned the work hour, the workload, but it seems to be one of those things that might be open for interpretation. What are some specifics of what you're hearing around?
So for the most part, we've had some private practice owners that stay open until 7 at night. And so those workers are being asked to stay and clean up and everything. By the time they leave, it's 8 o'clock at night. They're not seeing their children. And I think from what has happened over the last year and a half, I think we've all been kind of forced to stay inside, spend more time with our families, and maybe appreciate that time a little bit better than we did before. So that seems to be what is coming out almost with everybody that we talk to, is that they don't want to work the 50 hours a week anymore. They don't want to give 100% to their jobs anymore. They want to spend time with that family. Some of their kids are not in school anymore, so they are homeschooling. They have more responsibilities, I think, than they had before at home. We've seen daycares closed, we've seen schools closed. So it just seems to have snowballed at this point.
Fair enough. I forget exactly what you said there, around 100% to the job. Or to work. The interesting thing, and we can talk more about this because I'm sure there are questions about it. The thing that we've been hitting up against is, I don't want to give 100%, but I want to take 120.
Yes,
120%.
Absolutely, yes.
So there's a little bit around that, and I'll at least share how we have had we try to make it a very open discussion with every team member, whether it's at Breakthrough or at Madden and Gilbert. This is how this can work. So be as accommodating as possible, yet at the same time make sure we're able to keep our doors open.
Absolutely.
So quick introduction to Breakthrough. What we do is we help practice owners market their practice, direct and manage really that marketing with direct to consumer marketing. So we started in physical therapy. We now work with other healthcare providers as well across the board. We're working with 200 plus practice locations all over North America, and we've been doing it for quite a while now. And Wendy, I know we have a slide here for you. I'm sure it's coming up. So
it's fine.
So I want to talk about the barriers, but before we do that, I am going to back up here. You work with a ton of practice owners? I know you work primarily with physical therapy, private practice physical therapy, but can you give everybody an idea of how often you're doing the personnel placement? Because I know it's pretty extensive.
We probably, well, we do, we have a lot of advertising, we have our website. We are probably talking to over 50 or 60 people a day, individually, about jobs that we have open. We have never seen, and I've been doing this almost 20 years, we have never seen so many jobs open. Outpatient seems to be booming right now, which is great. So that, I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing. We are probably submitting maybe 20 to 25 people a week, whether that be a PT or an OT, but mostly therapists at this point. And we're probably placing about 5 or 6 people a week. So, and that would be on a national level. And a lot of it is going to depend on demographics. You know, we're of course much more successful quicker in bigger cities, but we are making placements in very remote areas. We're making a placement right now in Kenai, Alaska, which I hadn't even heard of before this. We do a lot of business West Coast to East Coast, you know, Central, the Midwest. So we're pretty much all over the place.
Love it. Also, for everybody that is watching right now, you can go to the chat log, and there's a link in there. You can click on that link and learn more about InSearch Medical and Wendy's experience there. So in terms of the barriers, things that get in the way, at least what I hear owners say is, one, there's a reluctance to bring a clinician on, or maybe toe in the water. So we'll do like an Indeed ad and hope something turns out for the best. But what's really getting in the way, at least when we have a deeper conversation with that owner, is I'm afraid that patient visits are not always going to be this high. So Wendy, you just talked about how outpatient physical therapy is booming right now. There's tremendous demand. And some owners, depending on where we're at in our private practice journey, might be thinking, is it always going to be this way? Right? So they're reluctant to hire. Barrier number 2 is, this is really an ego thing. And I'm sure nobody else on this call has ever experienced this before, but at least I did in the early days of private practice. I'm the only one that the patients want to see, right? Or some form of that. How do I bring another clinician on and have those new patients see the new clinician, right? And that is really, yeah, at least for myself, it was a journey through the ego barrier, where I would fully trust, you know, another clinician to provide the same high quality of care that I did. Do you ever run up against that, Wendy?
Yes, often.
Okay, great. So that one resonates. The third one here, I don't have any open positions today, so I don't need to think about sourcing. I know, at least for us, lead time, it has at least doubled in the last 2 years. So that means if it took us 90 days to fill a position back in 2019, 2020, in the beginning of 2020, now it will take us twice as long, 180 days. Is that about what you're seeing as well?
I would definitely agree with that.
If not worse, right?
If not worse, yes. And a lot of it really is demographics, and some of it is just the luck of the draw. But we get a lot of referrals too. So, and we've seen a big uptick even in this last week of candidates. So, which is good. And we've got our new grads coming around the pike. They should be starting to take their boards in April. So I would say anybody who's looking to hire first or second quarter probably should get started now.
Yes. If there is one nugget in our 1 hour together, it would be that. It's always be hiring. I know I was just working through this with our leadership team here, and we were looking at, you know, the increased capacity that we're going to have here in 2022, and literally just topped off of a call where we were putting those plans in place right now, creating the pipeline, making sure we have plenty of candidates to interview and ultimately hire. Always be hiring. Yeah. Number 4, I don't know how to ramp up marketing to fill a new hire schedule. So this is where you want to bring somebody on, and rather than being whimsical like we had up there in number one, this is where I'm not sure how to create a consistent flow of new patients, and we can talk more about that. And then finally here, I'm worried costs are going to go up if I hire more. And when Wendy and I were talking in preparation for this last week for this this webinar, the one thing that I had shared that I see a lot of owners do is they assume, let's say, it's a single site location, and the monthly revenue for a 2-clinician clinic might be $30,000 a month. Let's just leave it at that for the example. And let's say the expenses today are $22,000. So many times the owner will say, okay, so if I hire another clinician, that gives us the capacity to maybe generate $45,000 a month in income, but my costs are going to go from 22,000 up to 33,000. And that's not true. The costs do not scale directly because we have some fixed costs that by bringing on another clinician, those costs are actually going to go down per utilization. So that would be like space. So if we have 2 clinicians in 2,000 square feet, that cost per visit is going to be significantly higher than if we have 4 clinicians in the same 2,000 square feet. Or if we have a receptionist who's a full-time employee, there's an advantage in terms literally financial, I think they call it financial opportunity, or cost of scaling, right? So something to think about there. Don't let the cost of hiring get in the way of hiring if it makes financial sense. 8-step personnel system that we use here. And Wendy and I are going to touch on the first 3. So when we hire right now, I literally just looked at this last Friday. We have 88 employees at Madden and Gilbert Physical Therapy and private practice. This is what we follow. And this is really a private practice adoption of it's called WHO hiring system. It's by Randy Street and Jeff Smart. You can pick the book up on Amazon. But number one, we have sourcing. And what's sourcing, which we'll do a deep dive into here in a second, is how to get the right candidates to apply for the position. And Wendy, you just talked about an increase or an uptick in clinicians applying. So is that mainly for physical therapy? Is it for other positions as well?
No, it's mainly, we're mainly seeing it for physical therapy right now.
Awesome. So that's the first good news in a while for hiring PTs in terms of sourcing. But we're going to talk about different ways that you can do that, because at least from experience, many owners that I talk with are just simply posting an Indeed, an ad on Indeed, or maybe some physical therapy forum and hoping for the best. And there's a much better way that you can go about it, including working with professionals that are, and Wendy has, basically has cast a large net into the physical therapist and can do much more than you and I can do alone as independent private practice owners. Once we have those applicants coming in, then we need to have a screening process. We'll talk about that. And then we have a 4-step interview process, and we can do a deeper dive there. You can see the other steps below: onboarding. So that's once you do make the hire, how to get that new hire acclimated and trained so that they're a competent physical therapist. Scorecard is something that we use. Again, I'm going to not do a deep dive here on that, but you can go get into reading about that in their original book was called Top Grading back in the 90s, and that was written by either Randy Street or Jeff Smart's father, but you can see the more recent versions within that who hiring method that I talked about. Incentivizing staff, I know, is always a hot topic, and then ultimately termination as well. So when we're sourcing, and Wendy, I'll share first how I think about it, and then you can talk through what you do. Through sourcing, the very first thing that we do is when writing the ad, and I think this is commonly missed, but we get hyper specific about what we're looking for. When I look at, and I'll tell you where I look at is the APTA has an ongoing, I forget what they call it, basically where you can place an ad for a physical therapist. Mm-hmm. And I scanned, it was the first 100 that were in there, and they were all fairly generic, right? Some were a little bit better. Those ads were better than others in terms of explaining what they were looking for. But, every ad just in the pay to play bucket is going to have, we need a Pennsylvania licensed physical therapist, right? But getting very specific about the type of physical therapist that we're looking for, that for example, we're a manual therapy clinic and we need therapists that are willing to present. We make sure that is in our ad. What do you see in terms of messaging in the ads that is more effective, or things to be probably better to talk about things that should be avoided?
I think that most ads should be fairly generic, not in terms of you need a state license or whatever, but I think culture is really important. That the PT is going to feel valued and needed, which comes into onboarding, which we can go into a little bit later, because I think that's where a lot of companies fall short, not just in outpatient. And when we're sourcing, we have a customer service team at Indeed. So because we are running 300 to 400 ads a week, they play with our algorithms, they play with our keywords, and those are things that will push us up in terms of Google, in terms of being seen. And those things, it's hard to do as just a single practice owner that is running one ad. You just don't get the same coverage, basically. And then on top of that, we have our website, and then our website and everything that we do kind of filters out through the internet. So we show up in all kinds of places. So if somebody, types into Google physical therapist, chances are our name is going to come up someplace. And we're very specific about geographic location. We're specific about benefits. I think those things are really important. 401ks, people are looking for, they're looking for PTO time, they're looking for health benefits, particularly now.
Great. So we, in our ad, the thing that we have found that works best for us is explaining exactly what we're looking for in terms of physical therapists. You mentioned core values and culture. So we talk about that. Our three core values that we go over in our ads are number one, insistent on patient outcomes. So we want the physical therapist to, the way that we just describe it is, we want them to worry if the patient's not getting better. Mm-hmm. So that we have found that unique to our 42 licensed providers. The second thing that we look for is beginner's mind. So we're looking for some sort of history, that they're always learning, that they're taking Con Ed, not only on their own required by their license, but they're also learning in addition. Maybe they're doing master classes, or they just love to learn. They're genuinely interested in life. And then the third one is elevate others, that they're a team player. And we explain that in our ad. And just like you said, I completely agree. It really helps us flush out and attract the best candidates that match that, because if somebody hasn't necessarily resonated with the ad, then we want to equally repel them as well. We're not just looking to hire any team member. Number two on here is screening. which you do, Wendy, right? You and your team do the screening. So if you can talk about that, that would be great, because again, we don't want to interview necessarily every single candidate that applies.
Right. So we have a whole list of questions that we ask. We ask them exactly what they're looking for in a position. What are they looking for in the future? What are they looking for financially? And most important, we ask them, what are the 2 or 3 things that are most important to them? Because then we can match them to a client. If they say, well, I really wanted to do a residency program, and we know that we have a client that provides that, or provides mentorship programs, those are the things that we try to filter out. And we do probably a 15-minute pre-screen with everybody. And then if I would send you a PT, Chad, I would put all of that in a paragraph and say, this is, Joe Schmo, this is exactly what he's looking for. This is what he's accomplished in his career, or he's a brand new grad and this is what he's looking for, so that you kind of have an idea exactly what that person's looking for. And then you can tailor your interview around that particular PT as well.
Great. So yeah, we're very similar. We do a 15 to 30 minute screening interview over the phone in here internally. And essentially what we're asking for, just like you said, is what are you looking for? where are you at in your career? And ultimately, what do you want? Just to see if that's a potential fit. That candidate is a potential fit. By the way, we use nearly identical hiring process at Breakthrough, and it's worked well for both companies. In the hiring process, I know the one thing that you talked about is once the person gets through the screening, they come into the office, the average practice owner is, well, maybe this is the time to get some feedback here. So if you're on this, and if you're watching right now, if you're hiring a physical therapist, so you contacted Wendy and InSearch Medical, they have a candidate and you're about to interview them, how long would you normally allot for the interview? You can type that in the chat box. By the way, while you're doing that, if you do have a question on hiring on personnel right now, so Lauren Massey, California, says 2 hours. That's pretty good. That's better than average. John Toomey, 30 minutes. Come on, John. Marcia says 1 hour. Adam says 90 minutes. Liza, 90 minutes. Karen says an hour. Pam says 90 minutes. Okay, so we're in the same ballpark, 60 to 90 minutes. Craig says up to 120 minutes total. Also, if you have any questions, make sure you're popping those into the Q&A here. We'll be opening that up for a Q&A here in a second. Amy says 90 minutes. So the WHO interview that we do for clinicians, now this includes a working interview where we give them 15 minutes, and I'll explain that process in a second, but we do a 3-hour clinician interview. And there are some reasons that we do that. One of the biggest advantages is any sort of facade that might be there for the candidate, it completely goes away.
Yes.
After 90 minutes or so, they kind of are forced to let down their guard and no longer tell us just what we want to hear. But we go through a pretty thorough history of essentially since high school. How did they know they wanted to be a physical therapist? What was college like for them? And we ask, any other positions they've had or anything like that. We also talk about future pacing, and some people call it career pathing, but where do they want to be in 3 to 5 years? So I used to do a 1-hour clinician interview. I noticed the longer that we go, the better we can flush out the right candidates. Any advice on that, Wendy?
Yes, I want to just go back. You had mentioned that you do kind of a working interview. Mm-hmm. Over the last 2 years, one of the biggest changes that we have seen with new grads is that, and it is not their fault, but they have gotten bumped out of clinicals, or they have not been able to do manual therapy because of COVID. So they are coming out with weaker skills. We're seeing more people actually not pass the boards the first time around, which we very rarely have seen in the past. But I would ask all of you to do a working interview and let them do a little bit of a treatment. And just most of them will be very honest. If their skills are a little bit weak, they may tell you that their skills are a little weak. You can work with skills. You can't work with motivation and personality flaws. But we are seeing some decrease in skills over the last 2 years with the new grads.
Yeah, just really quick. Looks like we have quite a few questions now. So how we set this up is and by the way, I have made non-optimal clinical hires, which forced us to do this, but we were looking for the skill set. So we go into the room, the clinical director and myself will go in. I'm the patient, real life patient, multiple concussions, neck injuries on my left side. I have numbness frequently ulnar nerve distribution into my 4th and 5th digits. So it's usually there, and it's been there for 28 years to some degree. So we'll tell them to do an objective assessment and then treat me and then retest. And because our culture is we market direct to the consumer, 91% of our new patients come to us via advertising to the general public or a past patient list. We only have 9% physician referrals. So they're going to be under the spotlight a little bit more. They have to be able to make a meaningful change in those 15 minutes. So an example of our best one, and we're looking for how they think through, how they problem solve. So one of our physical therapists, Jan, who's now a clinical director, she did grip strength. I think I was 140 on the right and I was 105 on the left. And then she did the cervicothoracic treatment on me, did some ulnar nerve stretching. We did it again and I was up to 135. So, and it was legit. So that obviously she was a great hire, but we want to see what, the skill set is. We're not looking for the right answer in terms of, that they do a perfect evaluation and a perfect treatment, a right answer treatment, but we are looking for more so how they think through problem solving with principles and the skill set that they have available to them. So a couple comments. First interview, Liza says 90 minutes with the owner. And if they continue, we schedule a working interview for 4 hours with the entire staff. That's great, Liza. Lauren says we do a working interview too, but even for our new grads, we let them know that it helps us determine what variation of our mentoring program we recommend to them. Love it. All right, so Lauren's first question. Abby, I can moderate here. So Lauren asks, what about hiring front office support staff, especially part-time? Does this all still apply? I have not had great success in the last 6 months in this area. I can share what we do.
Okay.
Yep, it's so the way that I problem solve through this, Lauren, for marketing personnel, for reception, billing, front desk is we do exactly like I just shared. So here's exactly what we're looking for. We use a very specific EMR, Raintree. So we have that in our ad. It'd be great if you had Raintree or similar experience working in a medical office. Yeah, but very specific in terms of what we're looking for, and or very, not specific, very clear of what we're looking for in a candidate, and then also what our office looks like. And we say, we have 6 offices here in Central Pennsylvania. This is the setting. These are the hours that we're looking for, et cetera. So yes, it applies. And we still do the screening. We still do the interviews. It's not a 3-hour interview though. It is shorter for front desk. And we do a working interview, which is the telltale sign, because if they can work with our front desk for, I think it's a 2-hour working interview, then we have a really good idea of what their skill set is. I would look at your ad, Lauren, every time, or I would look to work with, do you do any front receptionist, front desk placement at all, Wendy?
I don't. No, we mostly do clinicians or clinic directors.
Okay. So that I am sure that there are companies that do that, agencies that you could work with to do placement there.
Yeah, I am not sure. I mean, it's something that we could do, probably not for part-time, but for full-time people. We would be able to do that as well.
Okay, great. And because I think we have another 15 people on since we had launched the poll, Lauren, or I'm sorry, Andrea or Abby, if you can launch the poll for people that are hiring, that would be great. And our next question is from Heman Patel. Is clinician okay to give working interview for 3 hours? So we don't schedule it. I mean, they're not treating in our clinic. They're treating me as a mock patient in a room. They're hanging out and observing. We want to make sure, because the thing that we've noticed is a clinician outside of the interview, when we're in the interview room, they're usually fairly tight and a little bit nervous and a little, we'll call it scripted. When they go into the clinic and they're observing other clinicians in our workflow, typically they'll, for lack of a better term, they'll let their guard down. Like you get the authentic person there. And usually, I know Joe and I will walk through the clinic if we do it at the Harrisburg office here, and we'll look at Michelle, who's PTA, who's been with us for 13, 14 years. And she'll just give us a thumbs up or a thumb. She knows exactly what our culture, our core values, everything else. She represents them, and she'll be able to give us a really good feel on whether they were a good fit or not. Any comment on that, Wendy, with the working interview?
I would definitely agree with that. I think that they start to relax around other clinicians. I think they start to ask questions when they're around other people. So I think you get a much clearer picture of what that person would be like to work with if you let them float through the clinic.
Yeah. Worst case scenario we've ever had was outside of like personal reveals that we probably shouldn't know about, but was somebody just like dove into money and like wanted to know what everybody was making, and that was over. That was over pretty good. So anonymous attendee, how else can we attract physical therapists to come join our staff? For practices that are associated with PT school programs, already have a generous PTO package, offer 45-hour work weeks, no evenings, weekends, or holidays, and a competitive wage for our area. We've sent out letters to those holding licenses in our state, attend career fairs at PT schools, posting on PT school career sites, host students for clinical rotations, Indeed and LinkedIn ads, used recruiting services. We have been actively looking and advertising for over 7 months.
Geographically, where are they? You know?
I'm not even sure of their name. So
okay.
They have themselves in as anonymous, but
oh, okay.
Anonymous attendee, whoever posted that question, if you can answer that in the chat or the Q&A, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I would find that, I mean, old school, it used to work when you could send out postcards to everybody that had a PT license. Those things don't work anymore. You really we have to go out and really get people, find people and dig deep for people. So, and that comes not just from ads. We offer referral bonuses to physical therapists that we placed before. The other thing is, after being around for 20 years, and you know that if you've been in practice for a long time, people know about you, and we get, you know, people change jobs all the time. They get married, they move. So we get a lot of people that maybe have been with us before and then come back when the next time they go to look for another job. So
Midwest.
Our net is pretty wide.
Great. Anonymous attendee said they're in the Midwest.
Okay. I mean, if they're in a remote area, it's going to take longer, possibly. I don't know. I don't think it really works to send out letters and things anymore. I think that you have to be more aggressive about recruiting now. So just placing an ad and hoping that the right person is just going to walk through the door. It really just doesn't happen like that anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's another thing that I don't hear mentioned often, but you just talked about it with the 20-year work history, or 20 years in the field. We depend on your networks, right? As much as you can. So maybe the direct mail doesn't work to 5,000 physical therapists in, the Midwest or Pennsylvania, something along those lines, but we'll reach out to head of departments that have accredited PT programs, our association networks, or any special interest groups that we're in, or anything like that, professional networks. So typically what we'll do is we'll create an ad, we'll do a video ad with it, and then ask our essentially friends and family in private practice PT to share that as well. And that, it may not lead to a flood of 75 applicants, but frequently what it'll do is help flush somebody out that is looking, or create at least a little bit of interest there.
And I think too that the other thing that has really changed over the last several years, before when a PT came in to interview, they were expected to sell themselves to you, tell you why you should hire them. Well, it's a two-way street now, and it's almost turning into a one-way street because they're getting multiple offers. So if you are doing things like this gentleman said, that it's a 45-hour work week, that he has a 401k, he's got benefits, those are things that need to come out during the interview process. So because they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them now, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I completely agree. A few years ago, we had on a webinar, Wendy, the late Jeff Ostrowski, and who was with Excel and Apex in the Philadelphia area. They have about 30 clinics, and I think at the time Jeff was covering, they went from 70 PTs to over, I think it was 165, and they did that in about 5 years, and he was doing the main hiring. But he talked about in that the first half or so, 60% of the interview was on looking at the candidate. But he said there has to be a point when you feel safe and you pivot and you start selling yourself as a company and selling the vision of where you're going and how that person fits in.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what you're saying is in complete alignment with that. And I've found that to be true. Heman Patel said, do they request to get paid? I will let us both off the hook there, and you should be contacting an employment attorney that is familiar with your state employment laws in the interview process. But I don't believe we've ever paid anybody for a working interview, and I can't even remember a request coming in.
No, I don't. I've not heard about that either.
Yeah. Marcia Nicholson, I've been running my practice part-time and now going into full-time. I have a pretty heavy caseload and have another DPT who wants to collaborate with me. How do I integrate her to my practice? Should I do that 2-hour interview? And how do I establish her salary?
In terms of salary, I think everybody, and Chad, you and I have talked about this, about bonus programs and salaries. And I think that whoever this PT is, you have to find out what's important to her. You have to find out what their salary history is, why they've left other jobs. There are other jobs that may not have anything to do with them leaving. It may not have anything to do with salary. It may have to do with they were driving an hour and a half to get to work and the traffic was terrible. And now you're going to be 10 minutes from home. So you have to, I guess, find out exactly what that physical therapist is looking for, what's important to them. And then you can get to salary. And I would leave salary really till the end. If somebody is just purely looking for money, they're probably not going to be the best employee.
Completely agree. Beware people who lead with money. With what you said there first, Wendy, and by the way, people get very emotional when we ask. We have people just literally break down and cry. in the interview process, but I'll ask the magic wand question, which is, if you had a magic wand and you could name exactly what you're looking for in your next position, what would that look like?
Right.
And we have had therapists that said, really, if I'm being honest, I want to work in a pediatric setting. And that was this is a real interview response. And I said, I can make a call and see if they're hiring, but this is not right for you. And that physical therapist became a lifelong friend. She ended up getting placed in getting a position within the peds department at the local hospital. And she brought her children through, and like lifelong friend of the practice. And that probably happened 16 years ago. So be willing to ask that question, what they're looking for. And then exactly what Wendy said there, we save salary to the end. And if they come in and they say, hey, I want to make, 90,000 or something like that, we'll say, okay, here's how you can earn that. The other thing I would say is, if you're doing a bonus program like we do, you also want to make sure you're not violating any anti-kickback laws or anything like that. So make sure that you're compliant. A good healthcare employment attorney can help you do that. Laura said, do you pay for candidates' travel to your working interview? I've been looking for over a year now, and I'm struggling big time. Looking for 3 PTs now in Prescott, Arizona.
Okay, so Arizona, and I do a lot of business in Arizona. So I have a client in Arizona that is a BPTM member actually, and his interview process is one of the best that I have seen. He pays and fly. They do about an hour phone interview first with the director, and then they actually fly the person out for 2 to 3 days. They pay for them to come out. They put them up. They introduce them to the team. They take them to dinner. If they want to go, they ask them what they like to do. Do you like to go kayaking? Do you want to go hiking? And they actually just take them out and they show them what it's like to live there, because nobody ever comes to me and says, I want to live in the desert in Arizona. So they've just been more creative, and we have probably made 7 or 8 placements, perhaps more, with them. And everybody loves them, and they come back and they say, oh, I want that job, because these were like the best human beings I've ever come across. So, we want our PTs to know who you want to know who they are and what they're really like. Let them know who you are too, as a human being and as a person. I think it's really important.
Completely agree. I know I have a friend who owns I believe 2 locations in Fayetteville, West Virginia, where I take my family to vacation. And we literally had this conversation. Why would somebody want to live here? I was like, there's whitewater rafting, there's abundant mountain biking trails, zip lining, all this other stuff. Like, that's the selling point of the area, right? But sometimes we get too acclimated. It's too close to us if we see it. But I love that idea of taking them out for a day or 2. Great. And it's working, right? It's
working like extremely well.
Yeah. So maybe we're underestimating the effort that it takes to hire somebody in the marketplace today. Laura says, thanks. Great. Any other questions for Wendy and I? If you do, you make sure to type those in the chat. And I have a question for you. What do you need the most help hiring with right now? Hiring for an open role, specifically a physical therapist, or filling a new hire schedule as quickly as possible. I know, at least early in my private practice career, I struggled a lot, Wendy. I think for the first 3 years, I had no hires, and I did the 5,000 mailers, and I bought the PPS. I actually bought the Pennsylvania list and the 8 surrounding states plus DC, mailed everybody. Yeah, so super big effort. And then once we changed our process, and I wrapped my head around really what it took to get this right, we ended up hiring 3 PTs in 4 weeks. So went from zero to doing that. So I know there's hope. The other big item that I know is a hurdle is filling that new therapist schedule as quickly as possible. Otherwise, it can become a liability for our business. And I think you probably have some stories around that as well. So question from Lee, bilingual physical therapist for minority community is extremely hard to find.
What language are they looking? Because we fill a lot of Spanish, and then sometimes on the West Coast, we have a lot of either Chinese or Vietnamese as well.
Chinese.
It really, a lot of it just depends on, first off, what language and where you are. So, if you're in Miami, Florida, it's not going to be hard to find somebody who's bilingual in Spanish. If you're in New York City, you will find bilingual people. If you are in, a remote area in Wisconsin, that's probably not going to be as easy. So
Boston.
Yeah, right. There you go.
That's Lee is from Boston.
Okay.
So they can contact you about that.
Absolutely, yes, and we have no problem. We're allowed to put that in our ads, and we're allowed to ask that question. And most people that are bilingual actually will tell us, because it's a huge plus. And sometimes it depends on what a client is looking for. Sometimes if they're bilingual enough that they can talk therapy in a different language, it's enough to get through the eval or the treatment. So, and sometimes people have an office staff member too, and I don't know what the laws are in every state, but sometimes you can find an office person that can help translate.
We have a former receptionist turned marketer who is fluent in Spanish, who will help in those situations, and it works out really well.
Right.
Love to follow up, Wendy. There's an email. So Lee has email there in the Q&A. We can grab that. Craig, how do you start with paid ads Indeed with confidence on ROI?
If you're running one ad, that's really hard to do. We're running 300 to 400 ads every single day. So, and like I said, we have a customer service team that boosts those ads. So I think I think people get, individual practitioners can kind of get lost on Indeed, or kind of get lost even on the internet or their website. So I think that's difficult.
Yeah. I went back to our team in preparation for this, and I had asked for our most successful ad on Indeed for physical therapist, and our team said, in 5 years, we haven't hired a physical therapist from an Indeed ad. So that's the degree of difficulty that you're talking about is legit.
Okay. And I will tell you that we get anywhere from 25 to 50 people coming into our inboxes every single day. We also use some resume search engines where people have posted resumes, and then we look every single day for everybody, and we pull resumes from those sources. So I guess what I'm saying is we have other sources to pull people.
Yep, great. Monique, do you recommend improving social media presence as a way to attract new hires, grads, in an effort to make practice more appealing and relatable? I can tell you what we've done that has worked. Wendy, anything there?
I use LinkedIn, but I don't use Facebook to find physical therapists. I think maybe for lower level people, you may find them on Facebook. But it's not a recruiting tool that we use.
Yeah. Central. So this is, first of all, this is Central Pennsylvania,
Okay.
Where I'm at. What we have relationships with the local colleges and universities that have accredited programs. 2 years ago, literally, I think it was January of 2020, right before the pandemic hit here. Well, pandemic hit everywhere. We had 17 final year DPTs in my office and I did a whiteboard session, and I had asked, hey, by the way, how many of you have positions today? And I think it was only maybe 3 of the 17. And I said, where are you looking for job? I just wanted to know. And they're not looking on social media. Now, what they'll say is, I know you're hiring, and I saw Professor Mike or Professor Joe shared your, like, I know you're hiring, and I've seen that. But yeah, they're looking mainly through personal and professional connections. Like tapping into that is key. So I don't think, unless you were offering something of supreme value, like how to pay off a student loan or how to find the right first right job or something like that, I think that would be a very tough way to go to build a social media presence to hire a PT.
I agree.
Jen asked, are there paid job boards you would either recommend or suggest avoiding for the role of a PT? We kind of stopped doing that about probably 5 years ago, but
yeah, I don't think that there's any really good job boards. We don't use any job boards at all. And we used to maybe 10 years ago, but those have kind of fallen off.
Yep. Great. I believe we're all caught up here. Wendy, what's the best way? This is from Craig. What's the best way to get in contact with you?
I can give you my cell phone number or an email address. Abby has all of my information.
Yes, give us a link to a landing page where you guys can contact Wendy. It's in the chat. Let me repost it quick too.
Yeah, Craig, so you can go, just click on the link and that'll have all of Wendy's contact information. And the question came up before too about ROI, so return on investment. And it took me a little while to realize this as a private practice owner, but the cost of not hiring, of never getting that clinician on board, is significantly more steep than the cost of hiring. So even if we went, like the practice in Arizona, when it's all said and done, it sounds like they may be investing $10,000 or more to get that hire in.
Yeah.
Right? So for all of us, I mean, we can think about that, but I assure every single person on this call, unless you're in a state that has only, $50 capped per visit type payer mix situation, that the cost of not hiring that clinician is always more than $10,000 a year, right? So
absolutely.
It took me forever to be smart enough to recognize and understand that. The other item that we really specialize in at Breakthrough is, once that clinician is on board, and let's say the treatment capacity is 40 visits a week or 50 visits a week, whatever your assumptions are, that in order to get the return, what dictates the ROI is how fast we can fill their schedule. If it takes a year to do it, that's pretty slow. That's very slow moving cash. If we can do it in 30 to 60 days, which is what our assumption is now, then we're great, right? And then we can bring that next therapist on board and the next therapist on board and keep the ball rolling there. Any comments on that at all, Wendy?
I definitely agree with you. And the other thing that we've seen over the last year and a half is that when clinics were forced to not be open or not see people because of the pandemic, nobody got better staying home and not getting treated. So now, even though, yes, we have some new variants and some of the things happening, I think most places are not shut down anymore. People are feeling a little bit more comfortable about going out and getting those elective surgeries that they didn't get. And I think that's part of the reason that we have seen a huge uptick in hiring, because they have, a lot of my clients said that they have waiting lists for patients, which goes to what you're saying too, that it's more costly not to hire than to hire somebody. Those patients will come.
Yep, completely agree. We just did this study on this as well, but looking back at our metrics, December, I think we did over 7,400 visits off the top of my head, and our previous high ever was 6,800. So same staff, same space, everything else the same, nearly a 10% increase over our highest ever before. And that just sounded alarm bells for all of our directors and our leadership team to get on the hiring as quickly as possible.
I definitely agree with that. And I hear the same thing from a lot of my clients, and not just in one area of the country, in all areas of the country. I've heard last year that they had their best November and December that they ever had, their best last quarter of the year. So like I said, people are not getting better sitting, staying home.
Absolutely. Yes. A lot of opportunity out there. Gary asked Abby regarding the January 25th webinar you referenced. Will I receive an invitation by email? I believe
Yeah,
so.
there will be an email out that allows you to register that. And I do believe that they all are at 3 Eastern.
Great.
So it'll be the same time, day kind of thing.
So just quick review for everybody. Abby did, or to mention this, Abby did reposted that link in the chat box. You can access Wendy's contact information there. Also, the email, just to call that out for everybody, is wendy@insearchmedical.com, spelled out exactly as it sounds, wendy@insearchmedical. And we will be hosting another webinar here in looks like 2 weeks on how to fill that new hire schedule as quickly as possible. So first you want to contact Wendy so you get the new hire on board. And then in our next training, we'll be going through how to ramp that new hires, the new PTs, their schedule up as quickly as possible. We'll be sending out invitations for that. At this point, Wendy, I think this is a good jumping off point. Thank you very much for being here and offering your expertise. This was great. Any parting wisdom or words of advice?
No, I'm here to help. I think we're all kind of in the same boat. So there are PTs out there. We can fill jobs. You can find those people. So I think the future is bright for outpatient.
That's great. Thank you very much, Wendy, and
thank you,
Abby, for hosting. Remember to visit getbreakthrough.com to access our free resource library designed specifically for private practice growth. While you're there, make sure you register for a complimentary growth assessment to learn about potential opportunities for growth in your local market. Again, thank you for tuning into the Grow Your Practice podcast and supporting our mission to help people in pain get back to normal naturally.